Hi guys, this is Craig, and I just wanted to give you a quick update after my meeting with James Watson. One of the things that we talked about, that he was explaining to me, is the idea of thinking about outreach projects and church projects in general in terms of hypothesis and testing the hypothesis. So, there were three things that we talked about with regards to the project that Wanner has with the new community moving in next door. So the people, what are they like? We can have hypotheses about that. Secondly, how can we minister to them? And what do visitors feel like when walking in? So if we start to imagine what the people moving in next door might look like, here's some people. Help us to start to imagine them. And that's give us a starting point. Maybe they're wealthy people who are commuting from Toronto. It's pretty close to the 401, and we know housing prices are getting pretty high in Toronto. So maybe that's why they're here. I don't know. That's a hypothesis. We could test that. Maybe one of the ways we could test that it would be to talk to a real estate agent. Maybe there's some other way we could test that. But we're trying to learn who our neighbors are, because to love people is to know people. It's hard to love people if you don't know anything about them. And we want to do some ministry. So what are these people like? How can we minister to them? All things that we can form hypotheses about. At the last Doors meeting, we did have some hypotheses about, that's a weird word, that we talked about on how we might do that. And thirdly, what does a visitor feel like walking in to Wanner? So I drew here a visitor. This is Wanner, a very rough approximation. And what does such a person feel like when they're visiting Wanner? Probably depends on the person, depends on the Sunday, but that's something that we can also form hypotheses about and test. And that's just sort of a neat scientific way of looking at it and doing it, and something that makes sense to do. James shared with me a cool story about a teenage girl in Cambridge at her church who set up a visitor center in the church to welcome, like a welcome center, with information and pamphlets and stuff. So that's a hypothesis. Will that make it better for visitors? She hypothesizes so. Now, he also shared with me right here this thing with this picture of this guy and this camera. And this is a document, a manual that James made up for the Fellowship of Evangelical Baptists. It's free on their site. It's transferable. It's something we could use because if we're looking for a study guide that is chock full of ideas on how to think about outreach, our community, gather information on our community, present it, interesting ways, the whole package. It's got it all in there. So that's something we could potentially do. I hope you guys are having a great night. I hope you're as excited as I am about doing research on outreach, doing some outreach, moving forward. It's exciting times we live in. I hope you guys have a great night.